We are delighted to welcome you to the 14th Jaipur Literature Festival, protected by DETOL. It's a pleasure to present today Apeirogon, Colum McCann in conversation with Ru Freeman. Colum McCann's latest novel, Apeirogon, is a story of a friendship which blossoms in the face of extreme conflict and grief. McCann's narrative follows a Palestinian and an Israeli man who, despite the divisions between them, are brought together by their unifying call for peace and harmony. McCann's stunning novel is built upon the foundation of the lives and personal recollections of these two men and is blended into a lyrical web across time, history, nature, and politics. In conversation with writer and activist Ru Freeman, he discusses the inspirations behind this tale and the undying quality of hope. Colum McCann is the National Book Award winning author of 7 novels and 3 collections of stories. He is the co-founder of Narrative 4, a global non-profit. His work has been published in over 50 languages. Ru Freeman, an award-winning Sri Lankan and American author of A Disobedient Girl and On Salma Lane, and editor of Extraordinary Rendition, American Writers on Palestine and Indivisible, Global Leaders on Shared Security. Her latest work is the forthcoming Sleeping Alone. Please do remember to comment by typing it into the comment section. Ladies and gentlemen, Apeirogon, Colum McCann in conversation with Ru Freeman.
Hi, Colum. It's great to be back here in Rajasthan virtually. And I want to open actually, with this book. I love the book. You should know that by now. But Alex Preston, writing for the UK Guardian, closes his review this way. It says, I kept thinking as I read it about all the ways that Apeirogon could have failed, about the ammunition it might have provided to all of those who claim that no one should write a novel that reaches beyond their own particular experience. It could have been maudlin, tawdry, exploitative, trite. Instead, it's a masterpiece, a novel that will change the world, and you don't hear that very often. So most writers would choose to write from that place of expertise when they want to write a book that changes the world. But you went where few dare to tread, the experience of a complete other. What compelled you?
Well, first of all, Ru, it's so nice to be here. So strange that we are sort of all around the world right now. I'm in Maine, and you're in Pennsylvania, and we're in Jaipur, and people are gathering with us together, and I think it reminds me of the idea of emergence. So many random things coming together and coming together in one powerful trust, which is something I kind of want to talk about in relation to your question and that extraordinarily generous quote. It's, I think as writers, and you do this beautifully, but we have to risk ourselves. Sometimes we have to risk embarrassment. Sometimes we have to risk even humiliation to go into places where supposedly we should not go. But one of the most important things to talk about right now, straight up front, I think, is that there has been an incredible amount of talk about going into other places and cultural appropriation, and I think I want to recognize those people in universities who were talking about this, and they started talking about it about 10 years ago in the campuses, very much, and they're so right. It's so dangerous to go in, and artists have done it, and corporations have done it, and all sorts of people have done it for years. They've gone in places and have sort of plundered and condescended and patronized and taken away. And at the same time, I often think in the exact same argument, when you expand it, there's also a sense of cultural celebration. When you go in with your head bowed, when you go in and you say, I don't know, I need to know. For my own culture, I need to know You sort of go in recognizing your faults and not trying to plunder anything whatsoever, but to expand the lungs of the argument in certain ways. I was always sort of fascinated and confused by what was going on in the Middle East, and after seeing what had happened in Ireland during the peace process there, which is now 22 years, almost 23 years old, which is an amazing story. I thought it would be interesting to look at what is going on in the Middle East, and I stumbled upon these two men who told their story, and honestly, I wasn't there to be didactic in any way or to rattle my politics around. I had no real skin in the game as such, except this story of these two men, which sort of opened up my heart in this extraordinary way. I went and met them in a town just outside Jerusalem, Beit Jala, in the West Bank. And when they told me their stories of how they had lost their daughters in the conflict in separate incidents, and then had decided to come together to tell their stories, I mean, the world was cleaved open entirely for me. And I thought, I can go to that human territory. I might get some of the things wrong, but I worked really hard over the course of 5 years, and I had lots of Israeli readers, and I had lots of Palestinian readers, and I had lots of conflicts within those two sets of readers, even to certain interpretations. But the most important thing for me was to try and get at the textual truth. I didn't want to talk about really area A, area B, area C, try to explain too much about them, because I was confused. And part of what I do believe is that we can embrace the confusion, and in embracing the confusion, allow it to be, and go deeper into what I find to be, those issues of, love and pride and pity and sacrifice and all these things that it can't be factual anymore. You can't wrap facts around love. You can't wrap facts around friendship. You can't wrap, borders around the idea of sacrifice and loss. But you can get at it with language. And that was one of the things that I wanted to try to do, to honor the heartbreak of their stories, and yet also to talk about a peculiar joy and a peculiar hope that sort of emanates from what it is that these men do, and these risk takers and women that around them, and their daughters themselves, their gone daughters, who sort of perch on my shoulder and whisper in my ear every now and then. So that's I wanted to go in and discover something for myself.
It's interesting you mentioned Beit Jala, because you talk about looking out over the city from there in the book, and I think about the fact that this emotional truth that you're basically talking about, that's what you're trying to get at. It's not even the actual location of Beit Jala or what exactly you're looking at, but that feeling of it. It's an interesting way, I think, that you found to bring that place and what's going on there to people around the world. When you think about it, you've traveled there, I've traveled there, we've been to, but right now under lockdown, for instance, we can feel some of the restriction, the feeling of that restriction here. And I think for a lot of people, if you don't read a book, there's no way to actually experience what that might feel like. So I feel like the book is doing a lot there in giving people that experience, taking out, but also leaving in a lot of the politics, because you bring the world in, you make the whole world culpable in some ways, in different parts of it, how we all participate in each other's lives. What was that like, doing all of that research that you did about the roads and the migration patterns of the birds and the armaments?
Well, it was an amazing journey. So I put it to you like this: so I went to Beit Jala, and then when I came home and came back to New York, I started thinking, Beit Jala, I should check out that town and start to read about it. And then I found out that there was a bird ringing center or a bird banding center in Beit Jala. Now I knew nothing about bird banding, and honestly I knew nothing about birds. But I thought, wow, that's kind of beautiful. It's kind of poetic. So all these birds are coming in from elsewhere, coming from Ireland, coming from Sweden, coming from South Africa, coming from Algeria, flying over this little patch of land that we call Israel and Palestine. And the birds land there, and then they get captured and they get tagged, and then they're allowed to go again. And as you say, we're all complicit. And I began to think of myself as a bird, or I began to think of readers as birds who could come in and land in this particular place, and maybe discover something from it. But in so many ways, yes, we're all culpable. We're all complicit in what's going on. But we also all have access to Abir and Smadar's story, and that's an extraordinary thing to me. Of course, we're talking about an area of the world where all of these feelings are really nuclear, right? We got the conjunction of three continents. We have Africa, we have Asia, we have Europe. We're all coming together. You have the birthplace of three religions. You have so many different, supposedly different types of people. You've got this mosaic that's going on, and the energy there is incredible. And all of us have been to Jerusalem in some form or other, whether it be just reading about it or dreaming about it or having faith in something that came from there. So it was interesting for me to go there and to try and bring it alive. I got taken by the birds, and I began to research the birds. And the more I researched the birds, the more things I would find that were there. And I sort of took off on a journey. It was a 5-year project, but I met Rami and Bassam several times. I went over, I traveled on Rami's motorbike. I walked through checkpoints with Bassam, and I know you've been there and been in those exact same checkpoints. You know what it's like, the ritual humiliation that people have to go through. I ate with their families. I met their sons and daughters and grandchildren. I hung around in Ramallah, in Jericho. I walked the shores of the Dead Sea. I spent a lot of time sort of soaking it all up like a sponge, and then trying to put it down in words so that the reader could be there, but without, as you say, leave the politics there, but leave the politics up to the reader's imagination. And frankly, I have to say, there are people who are a lot smarter in the world than I am, who can dissect the political situation. So my job, as you know, as a novelist, is to put us in the pulse of the moment, so that we're there. We're like it's a living, breathing thing. We can touch the book and actually be there. It's what you do so spectacularly, and what the writers, frankly, that I really admire, are able to do, to put us in a time, a geography, a body that is not necessarily our own, but somehow connect us to it. Was it tough? Yeah, this was the toughest book I've ever written. I've written 10 books, and just in terms of the research, because one of the girls is killed by a rubber bullet to the back of the head, and just reading about that was extraordinarily distressing. And one of the other girls is killed in a bombing, that was I had to research that. But for all my pain, I have to tell you this: the only way I could go forward was I had to remember Rami and Bassam's pain, because mine was minuscule in relation to what they carried and still carry all the time. And they are remarkable human beings. They're funny, and they're kind, and they're generous, and they're smart, and hopefully we can get them to the festival sometime in the next couple of years, because I would love for people to meet them in the flesh and sort of shake their hands when this whole crazy pandemic is gone and in the rearview mirror, and that will happen. But so for me, the process was difficult, but necessary. And in the end, I learned a huge amount, not only about the area, but and the men involved, but about myself as well. And you know, it was an extraordinary journey, I have to say.
I echo what you say about Rami and Bassam. Having listened to them talk with you a couple of weeks ago, they are just such fabulously engaged, present people, despite what they've been through. I remember saying, you know, one of my brothers said to me after the tsunami in Sri Lanka that, you know, people were trying to help all the kids who had lost parents, and he said to me, it's not the kids who've lost parents, it's the parents who've lost kids, because that's the thing you feel like you cannot live past, you know, as a parent. So I think you really managed to capture that, and yet these two people do, and they transform it into this whole other way of existing in the world.
Thank you. And there's no word in the English language, nor the French, nor the Spanish, nor several other languages for a parent who's lost a child. We have a word for you know, a widow or a widower or an orphan, but we don't have a specific word. There is one in Arabic, and there is one in Hebrew. Interestingly, I think there's one in Sanskrit as well. But a lot of languages find the idea of such a thing to be so awful that we can't even put a name to it. We talk about being bereaved and so on. But yeah, for a parent to lose a child is so extraordinarily difficult. In fact, I would have thought that there would have been one in the Irish language, but as far as I know, there's not one in Gaelic either. So it's you know, it's one of those things. And when they get up every single day, Ru, I mean, they tell their story over and over and over again. Now, when I first heard them, I thought this was amazing. I thought they were speaking directly to me. They were waking up my soul by telling their stories. And then afterwards, I found out that not only had that not been the first time they told a story, but they probably told it 3 times that particular day, and told it thousands and thousands and thousands of times in the years previous. And they keep going. And to me, it's like a Scheherazade notion. You know, they're telling their daughters the stories in order to keep the girls alive. And that was a big revelation for me when I thought, oh, that's what they're doing. And so I decided to put the book in 1001, what I call cantos, or tiny little chapters, tiny little songs, and also to reflect the fractured nature of everything that is going on.
And that structure is beautiful, Colum. Would you be willing to read a section from the book just to highlight how that feels?
Yes, I'm so happy to do that. So this is section 1001, and this is where I reveal who the narrator of the book happens to be. This was a big thing for me, Ru. Like when I was writing this book and it started, I was like, okay, you know, I'm going to do it in lots of different chapters. First, it was going to be 100, or first it was going to be 50, then it was going to be 100, then it was going to be 365, and kind of didn't know what I was doing. Like it's interesting for authors to reveal that, because sometimes you're operating on a wing and a prayer. You know, you got your arse in the wind and you're thinking, okay, let's. And I didn't know who the narrator was. I knew I was part of the narration, but I didn't know who the narrator was. And I thought, oh, I'm going to have to imagine a character who's telling this whole story. But it's in this section that I discovered who the narrator happened to be. 1001, and it's one long sentence. It's about 2 minutes. 2 minutes of reading, but it's all one sentence. Once upon a time, and not so long ago, and not so far away, Rami Elhanan, an Israeli, a Jew, a graphic artist, husband of Nurit, father of Elik and Guy and Yigal, Father too of the late Smadar travelled on his motorbike from the suburbs of Jerusalem to the Kremazin monastery in the mainly Christian town of Beit Jala near Bethlehem in the Judean hills to meet with Bassam Aramin, a Palestinian, a Muslim, a former prisoner and activist born near Hebron, husband of Salwa, father of Arab and Arin and Muhammad and Ahmad and Iba, father too of the late Abir. 10 years old, shot dead by an unnamed Israeli border guard in East Jerusalem, almost a decade after Rami's daughter, Smadar, 2 weeks away from 14, was killed in the western part of the city by 3 Palestinian suicide bombers, Bashar Sawala, Youssef Shuli, and Tawfiq Yassin from the village of Asariya al-Shamaliya near Nablus in the West Bank, a place of intrigue to the listeners gathered in the red brick monastery perched on the hillside in the mountains of the beloved, by the terraced vineyard, in the shadow of the wall, having come from as far apart as Belfast and Kyushu, Paris and North Carolina, Santiago and Brooklyn, Copenhagen and Terezin, on an ordinary day at the end of October, foggy, tinged with cold, to listen to the stories of Bassam and Rami, and to find within their stories another story, a song of songs, discovering themselves, you and me, in the stone-tiled chapel where we sit for hours, eager, hopeless, buoyed, confused, cynical, complicit, silent, our memories imploding, our synapses skipping, in the gathering dark, remembering while listening all of those stories that are yet to be told. And it's in that particular section that I discovered that the narrator was you, the reader. And I didn't know whether that was a bolt of lightning from above, or if it was just the stupidest thing that I'd ever discovered. Because maybe every book is narrated by the reader, but this time I tried to make it an active sort of engagement. And of course, you know, my publishers had to be pretty brave to allow me to call it Apeirogon. I'd only ever met 2 people who knew what the word meant. I didn't know what the word meant. I stumbled upon it and tucked it in my back pocket when I was researching Northern Ireland a few years ago, trying to find a word for a polygon shape, because nothing is of 2 sides. And then I found this thing, which was a word for a shape with an infinite number of sides, or countably infinite number of sides. And they allowed me to go with it. So not only was I stepping into sort of disputed territory. You're going to write about Israel and Palestine, okay? But I was going to call it, a word that nobody knew. But they had faith in me, and I'm deeply, deeply grateful for that.
Well, you kind of give the reader a map in some ways by explaining what Apeirogon means right at the start. So although Rami and Assam and this story, the revelation of the narrator in some ways doesn't come until page 228 in my version, you give us that roadmap. And I think when you say that the reader is the writer, the reader is the narrator, it also reminds me of, you talked earlier about leaving the politics out, but also leaving it in. And I think one of the things you've done really well in it is people think of this place as a place of intractability. There's nothing can be done. There's no solution possible. There's no way in. It's the good luck. Try and write about this if you can, kind of feeling about everything to do with Palestine and what's going on there. But you equip the reader with an empathetic place that, so long as you're hearing the stories of someone, so long as you're absorbing that and you're living it as if it is yours, you're taking Rami's story and Bassam's story and all the other stories that, shoot off from their experience, there is a way that you can enter the place and change the place. It doesn't have to be the way it is.
You know what's really interesting about what's going on right now? You see all the stuff happening with the hedge funds being taken down by ordinary people who are investing. People who've come in and we talked a little bit about emergence and that for years and years and years power was always coming from the top down. No matter what we did about it, it was there was always a top down approach. increasingly we have access to a sort of bottom-up sort of approach. Young people getting together, like walking out of classrooms in Sweden, and then building whole climate movements based on all of this. And if we don't believe that there is a possibility for us to change things, then we should just go back into our cubby holes and forget about writing books and so on, and because there really is a possibility that things change. I grew up. I know that you know about latent violence. You know about national violence. I grew up. My mother is from Derry. My father's from Dublin. In the 1970s and 1980s, if you had told me that in Ireland we would have peace, even a rocky peace, even an unstable peace, I would have said you're mad. You're absolutely mad. And yet, people came along. The Women's Coalition started doing things. Bill Clinton got involved. The Finnish government got involved. People came together. George Mitchell went in there and listened to people's stories. And this peace was built out of many different pieces. The glue of it was entirely human, and it wasn't like these power structures coming from above. And I think Rami and Bassam would say, are things dark? Yeah, they're dark. And do we have to sing about the dark times? Yes, we have to sing about the dark times. But eventually, what they do is they throw a tiny pulse of light against this wall of doubt and dark and cynicism. But eventually, enough of it can intrude. And I'm not sentimental at all, but I am full of sentiment. I'm also full of rage, and I like the idea of sacred rage. And there's a lot of people, risk takers in the world, who are talking about things like peace and engagement and understanding, who are actually, filling the world with a sort of secret rage about some of the stuff that is going on. Is it possible that we could build a movement, or some kid in India or Sri Lanka or Ireland or in the West Bank or in Gaza itself, could they build a movement whereby the power structures fall? I think it's not beyond the realm of possibility. I'll put it like that.
Well, sorry, go ahead.
But that's risking. That's risking things. That's having sentiment, but not sentimentality.
Yeah. I think the very fact that you add in these details that seem unrelated in some ways, like where these weapons are built and things, like tracing certain histories back and forward throughout the book, gives you a sense of that as well. This is how these things came to be. Well, there are other ways that things can keep going that might have a different outcome. I also think it's really fascinating that, Rami and Bassam, like you say in the book, speak about this all the time. They keep telling this story. To take a story that has been told so many times, and also one that is very well known by the public. You can Google Rami and Bassam and you can find the details, and then change it into something that is true to their story, but at the same time, this tremendously different. Takes a certain skill and intent. There's an intentionality to that.
Right.
So, good job.
Amazing. Thank you. You know what's amazing? I've heard it hundreds of times, maybe thousands. When I think about all the times I listen to them on tape and so on, but at least hundreds of times. And each time it hits me with the force of an axe. Something new is there. John Berger talked about the idea that never again will a single story be told as if it were the only one. Arundhati Roy, actually, one of the other great heroes of mine when it comes to, the idea of activism and engagement. She often quotes John Berger in relation to that. And this is what's interesting, who gets to tell the story now? and who gets access to it. You and I are both involved with Narrative 4, which is a global nonprofit organization that has young people step into one another's shoes, and in so doing, learn the act of radical empathy through storytelling, and then turn that storytelling, we hope, into new action on the ground. I do think that storytelling has that power. That, people say that we're held together by molecules or by quarks or whatever it happens to be. But I think we're held together by stories in so many profound and interesting ways. And we can access each other through stories. And there's no Olympics in storytelling. Nobody has a better story necessarily than the next. But if we get to know one another and we get to talk to one another, well, like Rami and Bassam say, this is the power. And what Bassam says is, you know what, I need to know you above ground. Because if I don't know you above ground, guess what? I'm going to know you 6 feet below ground, and we need to understand one another first. And that's kind of simple, but it's not. It's like all the great ideas. They seem simple in certain ways, like the grand unified theory of, if we could make a grand unified theory of peace, it would be amazing. I think somebody's gonna talk about it, certainly in relation to what's happening in the Middle East, and will we ever have a full and clear planet that doesn't have war? Of course, I mean, I don't see it in any manner or means. That's utopian and probably crazy. But I do think that there are ways that we can engage with each other on deeply human levels. And the other thing that was really interesting about Rami and Bassam, Rami, the Israeli, he acknowledges that he did not see Palestinians as human until his daughter died, and he saw a Palestinian woman. He went to a grief group with the Parents Circle, which is what Rami and Bassam are deeply involved in. And he saw a Palestinian woman stepping off a bus, clutching a picture of her daughter to her chest. And he realized that her grief, was the same as, or not the same as his grief, but had similar repercussions and depth as his own grief. And that's when he started to change. And that seems like a simple idea. Oh, we need to recognize the humanity in one another. But it also is, nothing is ever simple, especially simplicity. And that's one of the things that we work at through Narrative 4. We try to scuff things up a little bit and say, oh, these things are confusing. And these things are difficult, but we're so much more nuanced than people actually give us credit for, which is kind of a fantastic thing to engage in. And that is the job of literature too, to throw a grenade in against the inanities that get told, and to make it human again. I shouldn't use the analogy of something violent, though. That's I don't know, but you understand what I mean.
I mean, Ocean Vuong talks about this. He talks about how we use the language of violence has become a lot. It has become a vernacular on so many levels. You have to actively not do it, but it's hard. Right. Rami and Bassam. The other thing, to go to Narrative 4 and the story exchanges. I've done a couple of story exchanges now with Narrative 4, and it has been transformative even for me who tell stories and write stories all the time. Just having that exchange it's a very different feeling to take someone else's story and live it like it's your own, because it's as if you trust someone else with a piece of you and you carry them through your life. So Malak and Bucci, Malak who's in Palestine and Bucci who's in Africa, they're with me in that way. With Rami and Bassam, it's interesting because they acknowledge the absurdity of things as well. It's not that they only talk about, I remember Rami talking about Israel was going into lockdown and he wasn't going to be able to see Bassam said, "Oh, well, now you get a sense of what it's like to be Palestinian," and
Yes.
it's kind of that sense of humor it runs throughout their
Yeah.
conversation. Yeah.
And they have to have a sense of humor. One of the things that's beautiful and also disturbing about all of this is, these men really sort of love one another. I have a picture in the book of them falling asleep on a train in Germany with their heads on one another's shoulders and that sort of thing. But their sons are now involved. Very directly involved with the parents' circle and telling the stories of how they lost their sisters. And then both men now, Rami and Bassam, have grandchildren, and each of them individually and separately talk to me about the heartbreak that it would be if their grandchildren had to continue, telling these stories or these sort of stories. They want for it to stop. They want for themselves not to have to tell these stories. It's almost like they're cursed to do it. It's an extraordinary engagement with grief and necessity. But watching your sons do it, and you don't want your grandchildren to have to do it. To have a sense of humor in the face of all that, and to travel the world. And I will tell you this, they have a tagline between them where they say, haven't the Jews suffered enough? And it comes from a skit that on Israeli TV. And I saw them in New York. And it was after a reading, and Bassam was helping Rami take off his jacket. It was cold out, and we were coming out of the rain. And Bassam leaned across and just said to him as he took off his jacket, haven't the Jews suffered enough? And helped him off with his jacket. And they both sat there laughing. They both and it was just one of those tiny moments that you see in life, and you think, we can do this sort of thing, and it's all based around fear, Ru. I mean, fear makes money, fear makes settlements, fear makes border control, fear makes checkpoints, fear does all of these things, and so there's a lot of investment, including American investment, in sowing fear of one another. And what Rami and Bassam are trying to do is say we have no reason to fear one another, and what we need to do possibly in this country is say we have no reason to fear one another. If you're from Kentucky and you're from the Bronx, you can tell stories to one another, and you can communicate, shatter stereotypes and break down boundaries through the force of stories and storytelling, and I think that's where good things happen, like in festivals. We get together and we get a chance to tell these stories to one another, and we hope that we can go out into the wider world and break down the fear. But we've got to recognize the fear too, and the ones who are sowing it, the corporations who are sowing it, the business people who are making tons and tons of money, the Kushners of the world who are making tons of money on sowing fear into people's hearts, and forcing them to be distant to one another. We don't need to be so distant to one another.
In some ways, your book is. You remember the whole time when the little, the picture of the little rock against the bulldozer that is often, portrayed around the world, and these little kids often are doing it, and it seems so useless, but it's this act of defiance in some ways, and it's also, traces back to Muslim faith, but I also think of your book as being this kind of thing that you're lobbing into, but it's more like I don't know, I'm probably going to butcher this, but it's like a frisbee or something. It's going out. It's in some ways sad, though the story at the center of it is going, and it's coming back and picking up something very beautiful and coming back and giving hope to people. And it comes through the power of really living the story of this other person. So I know we don't have a lot of time left, and I know you want to talk, but I'm hoping that you will conclude by reading a tiny little piece from 101, where you're talking about how you start to live someone else's story.
Section 101.
102.
102.
Yeah.
Oh, just that little section. So this is 102. They were so close that after a while, Rami felt that they could finish each other's stories. My name is Bassam Aramin. My name is Rami Elhanan. I am the father of Abir. I am the father of Smadar. I am a 7th generation Jerusalemite. I was born in a cave near Hebron, word for word, pause for pause, breath for breath.
Thank you, Colum.
Ru, thank you. It's so nice to chat with you, and let's get over to the festival together at some stage and keep telling our stories. And I really look forward to your new book, Sleeping Alone.
Yep.
Thank you, Colum McCann and Ru Freeman, for revitalizing us with the lyrical story of hope and empathy in the face of overwhelming odds. We thank our celebration partner, Diageo. Thank you all for watching and being such a great audience. Please stay logged on to continue to watch with us the series of exciting sessions featuring a stellar list of speakers that have been specially curated for you. As you are aware, the cultural sector has been critically impacted by the pandemic, and while we have braced ourselves to embrace the new normal, we have struggled to ensure that we can continue to bring you a free flow of knowledge and ideas. We would love for you to support us at Teamwork Arts. Any contribution is welcome and would help spread knowledge and ideas seamlessly against all odds. Please tweet using hashtag Jaipur Literature Festival 2021 at Jaipur Lit Fest. The festival is protected by Dettol. Hope to see you in the next session.